Hello and welcome to This Week at the Movies. I'm Matt,
And I'm Eric.
and today we will be wading into our first new release of 2025, which is a horror film. Pretty excited about this one. Glad to be back looking at new movies. And the first one up is Wolfman, which comes from Lee Wanell, who gave us The Invisible Man in 2020, was also the screenwriter that wrote the original Saw movie and the first two sequels, and was behind the Insidious series. Obviously, very closely tied into different horror movies and horror franchises, has moved on. This is now the second of the kind of old Monsterverse movies that he is giving a reboot. In this one, we get Christopher Abbott as a guy who has had a somewhat estranged and icy relationship with his father after growing up in a secluded part of the Oregon woods. He gets a notice that his father, who went missing a few years earlier, has been declared dead. So he has to go check out the old family homestead. He convinces his wife, played by Julia Garner, and his daughter to accompany him. And as you might suspect, things do not go according to plan. They get attacked on the road. Some sort of animal or creature. Blake gets injured, and slowly we start to see things beginning to change. And it makes for one long and tense night out in the middle of a remote nowhere. I like the setup here. I liked a lot of the shots. I thought it was a good cast. But Eric, did this movie work for you?
Christopher Abbott worked for me, and he worked hard to carry this movie. And there everyone does a decent. Julia Garner does a decent job. Matilda Firth, the daughter, is a surprisingly competent child actor. She's doing a good job. There wasn't a performance that I didn't believe. But I was surprised that this was all in one night. I'm glad that we said that, because I'd like that. When things start moving, they start moving so quickly. But it leads me immediately to like all these little questions that I have that the movie leaves me with, which I seriously think that there is a decent chunk of this movie that is cut out or removed, mostly having to do with the relationship between Blake and Charlotte, Christopher Abbott and Julia Garner, because we have a couple of solid beats of him saying, I want us to enjoy each other. I want our family to go together and have a family experience. I'm worried because I feel like things aren't good between us. And she's like hesitant to say anything. She seems guarded. She seems like there's something she's not saying. And then something happens, and I can't tell if she's just trying to comfort him, but she just kind of comes out with, of course, I love you. Of course, you're my best friend, and everything is like really good. And that felt odd to me. It felt like there were some unspoken things. Also, this like weird detail. They get to the farm that they're trying to get to, and they're trying to make sure that they're safe inside the farm, and they're investigating, and they go downstairs and they find the basement. And there's a moment where Christopher Abbott is like, what did that smell? I smell something. And very briefly, Julia Garner is like, what? Like, and acts bizarre. Like there's some reason that she would be concerned that he's questioning a smell. But then he just finds meat in a locker, which,
if his dad was missing long enough to be declared dead, which I believe in most states is 3 to 5 years, that's your game fresh, man.
Yeah. So yeah, like, it just was what it was, but it leaves all these lingering little ideas that there's a bunch of things that Charlotte is not saying. And I don't think we ever really get to hear what's going on with her. But we get like enough, and that's a thing. I don't really need necessarily more than what the movie's given me. I'm actually gonna give this one thumb up on the back of Christopher Abbott's performance and the practical effects, and like the pacing of gradually drawing him through this transition, and the like emotional weight of him suddenly realizing, oh, I have been able to be with my family and protect them so far, but that is not going to be forever, and I have to make a hard choice. And just that core story right there, maybe if things had been tightened up and it had been a little sharper on that, I would have been more confident about this one thumb up. But it's just one thumb up. It's visually surprisingly engaging. There's something to this modern aesthetic, and Leigh Whannell likes to do a lot of locking the camera on an actor and following it around, and like this sequence in Invisible Man where they're going down the hallway, and it's a little, I'm a little bummed that there's 5 years between these two installments, and I hope there's not 5 years between this one.
Yeah, well, and will there be a next one? I think box office. I think the only reason we got this is because Invisible Man was such a surprise hit.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked, I wasn't super excited before going to see it, and I really liked what they did. I liked the performance from Elizabeth Moss and everything about that. That was a movie that had a lot of staying power, and I think that's what convinced them that they definitely needed to go forward here. But in terms of MonsterVerse characters, you don't have I don't think they're going to do Dracula again. I mean, we just literally got Nosferatu.
And we're getting
Guillermo del Toro
as
is doing Frankenstein. I guess he could remake The Mummy, but that's brought. I really liked the Brendan Fraser take, and everybody would like to black out and forget that they ever saw the Tom Cruise version. So I mean, there's some potential there. We'll see how this one fares financially. Go ahead.
Just one thing I forgot. So a thing that ties these movies together is where this one equates to exploring domestic violence. The new one seems to equate to exploring generational anger or generational trauma, and doing that, taking these monster movies and make them an allegory for like, I mean, they're not necessarily problems that didn't exist in the past, but they're problems that we're very acutely aware of in the present. That's the trend that I kind of hope would continue if they did decide to do it. But I think The Mummy is one. I don't know what it would be. I don't know how they would spruce that up. Yeah,
we kind of got to see. So you touched on a few things. I obviously liked The Invisible Man, so I was curious to see what they were going to do here. The things that I liked the setting and the visuals. I especially like the transformation, makeup and artistry that they did with Christopher Abbott's character, that slowly turning over. I thought that they did that really well. I thought it had a nice cast. You have an opening sequence that I think is meant to establish this something that I don't know if they did enough to make that pay off where it's supposed to pay off in the middle. And I'm with you. This movie is only around 100 minutes, so it's not a big commitment. But at the same time, to really make the third act work, you need to be emotionally invested in these people. And that's where I just don't know that there was enough. You get a couple of nice beats between him and his daughter, but you also get a weird non sequitur at the beginning where he flashes rage. Are we meant to see that what they never really go back to that? He's like, I don't want to be the person that loses their temper. Is that just him channeling a piece of his father? We don't know. There's some kind of weird icy estrangement between the spouses that is never really explained. He talks about being between jobs, and there's like an awkward pause, but there's no real explanation. And then, when you get these profound professions of deep love between them, that almost feels like it comes out of nowhere because you haven't felt really any of that in the run up. And so those are some struggles, and I'm kind of decidedly thumbs neutral. I was not invested enough in the characters. I actually, even though it's only 100 minutes, it felt a little dry at times because you're kind of just moving from one action set piece to another for the last hour of the movie with very little tying it together. The, you know, surprise of who he's fighting was the least surprising surprise of all time. And you don't even really have a lot of time. There's no real emotional processing because he obviously recognizes what it is, then goes outside, and after spending, putting himself in peril for like the last 20 minutes to protect his family, now he's decided he needs to eat them. And so you're like, I'm sorry, spoiler alert, but it's Wolfman, so it can't be that big of a shock.
Yeah.
And then you had some weird, like, gross sequences that weren't explained. Like, I don't know how you eat your own leg off and are still able to run through the woods and not suffer, that kind of profound. Let's forget the pain. What about the profound blood loss that would be,
I mean, it is literally just being bitten that kills one of them.
And how do you climb a freaking tree with a stump? So there are other questions that I had. I don't think it was a bad idea. It didn't work for me the way the Invisible Man I thought was surprisingly fun. This one I just thought was okay. And that's where, do we need to keep revisiting all these things? We don't need to. Are they going to, if this one makes money? But I don't know that it's a lock that it makes money. Like, most of the country is under a horrific weather situation right now. It's also January. I'm pretty sure The Invisible Man came out during President's Day weekend. When it came out, I have to look it up, but I feel like it was a little bit later in the year and came during a holiday. Yeah. 2020 feels like a million years ago.
And also that whole year is just a big splotchy blur. Like,
well, and Elizabeth Moss has her own, like, built-in fan base from a lot of projects that she's done.
Yeah,
and while people respect
Mad Men,
Christopher Abbott and Julia Garner, I don't know if she's quite the same box office draw.
Yeah.
This movie had kind of an interesting marketing campaign. Yeah, February 24th. 2020. So it came out near the end of February. It feels like that's a little bit of a different kind of time frame when you're going along. The first couple weeks in January are usually kind of a real dry period. So I'll be curious to see what the box office numbers end up being for this. I don't think it's a bad film. I don't want anyone to come away that I think it's bad. It wasn't like super dynamic. I saw it. I don't feel any need to like rush out and see it again. And the more I sat and thought about it, the more questions I had about the story, which is kind of a little unfortunate.
Like, what happened to the original creature?
Yeah. What? Where is the original? Yeah. So all those things. But any other thoughts about this one?
Just when I think about what happened to the original creature, I think that they missed an opportunity with that meat locker to open it up and have it be like the dad had hunted the original creature and was like studying it, and they found it in there, and it could have been like a really like imposing like threat of like, look, this thing is human. It was human. Look what's happening to you. You're turning to look like it, so that the wife could be on the same page of recognizing what's happening to him while he's recognizing what's happening to himself. And it could have given more of a reason to try to communicate and talk about things. And I just wanted to understand and care about that relationship more. But that's, yeah.
Yep. That's the way it goes sometimes. Well, there are a few other things out in theaters I thought I would shout out before we go. There are a couple of films that are either getting an expansion or a re-release that were kind of end of 2024 movies that I had up pretty high in my year-end review. One of them, September 5th, we're September 5. We talked about this one, the 1972 Munich Olympics. You're following the ABC Wide World of Sports team as events unfold in the Olympic Village. That one had a real narrow release at the end of 2024. Now is expanding this weekend. It was supposed to be playing everywhere. I have not seen it pop up in our local theater, so it was supposed to expand nationwide. What does that mean? If it's available for you, that one would be interesting to check out. Another one that is releasing for its Academy Awards run that I had way up in my list is Sing Sing. It got barely kind of a short release at the end of July. I think it got released the same weekend as Deadpool and Wolverine, which might be why you never really saw it. But it should be a key award contender, and it is getting the re-release finally. A24 putting it back out there. That would be a great one to go check out. The movie The Substance also got re-released this week. It's available to stream on Mubi, but if you want to see it in theaters, both of those kind of award season re-releases. And then we didn't have a full new original show last week. I covered some of the limited releases that were coming out, but the first kind of big wide release last year was Den of Thieves Pantera. This was an interesting one. I would probably give it a mild thumbs up. I liked it for what it was. It's interesting. If you saw Den of Thieves in 2018, it was like a dirty, gritty Heat. You basically had a crew of cops and a crew of robbers, and they're pulling off these jobs, trying to come together. I would say this one had a very different vibe. It's set in Europe. And while you have Gerard Butler and O'Shea Jackson Jr., you do follow a crew of thieves, but Gerard Butler's very, very detached from his police group, and he's kind of decided to go over to the other side. It almost feels a little more like a Fast and Furious buddy. What they're doing with him, with Butler and Jackson, almost feels a little bit like what they tried to do with Vin Diesel and Paul Walker. So it feels like a little bit of a different kind of vibe. The best parts, it's too long. It's 2.5 hours.
Oh,
not sure it needed to be 2.5 hours, but the actual main heist sequence is very cool. And there is an exceptional car chase after that. There's like 35 endings, as I think they're trying to build something of a franchise. And you'll probably even more get that Fast and Furious vibe through some of those 35 endings. But I enjoyed it for what it is. I think O'Shea Jackson Jr. is an underrated actor. I had a lot of fun watching him in this one. So if you missed that last week and you're looking for an action movie, that is one to check out. The original Den of Thieves is streaming on Max, so that one's also like 2.5 hours. So my only qualm is I'm not sure these kind of movies need to be not making high art, guys. You can probably trim some of the fat, but they're having fun. It works for what it is. That was the number one movie at the box office last week. Not a huge surprise. I actually would not be surprised if it's still the number one movie at the box office, which is what I think portends poorly for both Wolfman and One of Them Days, which is the other new release that opens this week. And then next weekend we get the kind of crisp Mel Gibson directed flight risk movie with Mark Wahlberg, and that one's like only 95 minutes, so I expect that's probably going to resonate a little more with people too. It feels like this is more of the season for action.
It has. I think that started around 2010 when Taken came out in January, and then The Gray came out like the next January, and Liam Neeson had like a string of January movies.
Last year was The Beekeeper.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, and actually, I forgot the original Den of Thieves, I guess, came out in early January. So kind of a good season. That'll do it for us this week. We should be back next week talking about the aforementioned Flight Risk, a movie that was originally slated for November of last year that they pushed to January. It might be a better January fit, but Mark Wahlberg on a plane, balding. Who would have thunk it?
Yeah.
Who would have thunk it?
Yeah.
So we'll look forward to checking that out. It's going to be another week or so before we get the Oscar nominations. So I'm sure we'll weigh in on those when they come out. They have been pushed back I believe it now. They're tentatively expecting them to make that announcement on Thursday, January 23rd. So hopefully we'll see by the time we're back together next week what gets nominated. I'm kind of curious. It feels like a wide open year. We've seen so many different things win at different critics groups and different precursor awards. I just have no feel other than I really love Dune Part 2, and nobody
Mm.
seems to remember it ever even took
Oh
place.
no. Oh no.
So,
Yeah, 2024 is such an interesting year because of what was available after the writer's strike and what was popular and whatnot. And I am really excited this award season to see what people care about.
yeah. Yeah, it'll be curious to see. So, well, that'll do it for us this week. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Stay warm and safe out there, depending on where you're at. There's like a range of weather from blizzards to extreme cold to half the state burning down. So, thoughts and prayers with everybody out there. 2025 has certainly gotten off to
A start.
a start. Yeah, a start. So we will see you next week. Until then, see you at the movies.